Welcome. This is our call on parenting an intense child, specifically focused on keys to a successful school year. So I'm Samantha Moe, and I lead these monthly gathering calls for free, so that parents who have an emotionally intense child can come to this space that feels very tender, might be a good word for it, and safe. Because one of the things that I really stand for, having become I actually started working with kids who are intense 19 years ago. I got my master's in communication disorders and specialized in autism. But 7 years after that is when I shifted my career and became a certified parenting coach and life coach. And one of the reasons for that was because I saw that there was the need for parents to huddle and be able to share what was going on with their families. Um, Especially when we have a lot of knowledge already. I think parents are really great at looking up resources, listening to podcasts and audiobooks, processing with a significant other, or taking calls from teachers and practitioners when we're looking for ways to make life better for our kids and for ourselves as well. And so that's what this space is. If it's your first time joining one of my monthly gathering calls, it's a place to meet that's no obligation, and help you to see the perspective that I take in our culture. The culture of our community takes folks who go through Mad to Glad, when it comes to caring for our children and caring for ourselves in a way that's not judgmental, because we can get in that negativity spiral pretty quickly when we have a kiddo who has big emotions and big behaviors. So as we're in our September gathering call, the topics that I want to cover today are some that I regularly cover. One of them is why do kids act the way that they do? And I geek out a bit on brain science. So I want you to know from a fight or flight perspective what's happening in your kid's brain. And I want us to think about this and apply it to this season and this stage of your child's life or children's lives, as well as your own, and where you're at in your healing and feeling grounded process as a grown-up. The other thing that we talk about today is how do we parent kids who have strong will, strong emotions, strong sensitivity, strong energy, strong overwhelm, strong control behaviors? How do we parent these kiddos in situations that can feel difficult for us and more challenging maybe than a kid who has a harmonious or pleasing temperament that just listens because they like when there's a smile on your face and things feel smooth in the family dynamic. We're going to have an opportunity to look at what's happening beneath the behavior. So this means I'm going to open it up for anybody who wishes to chat about their family with me, do some spot coaching. And I'm going to share some tools today, not just about understanding defiance and challenging behavior, but with the onset of the school year, how can you create a positive and supportive home environment? One that really strengthens your connection with your child, even in the midst of things like transition and anxiety and phone calls from the teacher or refusals to go to school. Like, how do we protect your relationship with them so that you feel like you're doing the things that you really have control over? You get to influence how you show up. And then for anybody who wants to learn more details about any of my upcoming programs, I'm happy to share that if you want. Otherwise, I can send that in an email, because we have our fall parenting cohort starting in October, and I only run it twice a year. So it's a really nice kickstart for parents who are looking for some concrete tools to make things more peaceful and positively connected at home. All right. So as far as I gave a little bit of my background, but I love to tell the story about being an autism specialist well before I had my own children, and having my hand on the door of a third grade classroom and being filled with dread because I was anticipating the meltdown of Charlie, who was known in the school for his epic meltdowns. And I had this moment of using all of my powers of persuasion to get out of the classroom without a meltdown with him. And as we neared my office door, we were only 10 steps away, and he dropped to the floor screaming the things when you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed out of school, you never want to hear a child screaming at you in public. And as I looked down at him and felt the judgment, as I looked over at over my shoulders at teachers peering out of their classrooms, I remember the sweat rolling down my back and thinking, I have no idea what to do here. Do I sit with him? Do I physically guide him? Should I run and grab the breathing ball that the social worker taught me about? Can somebody help me? Should I bring him back? I wasn't sure what to do. Now I have a 3-year-old at home, and so this was many years ago, this story I'm sharing now. But right now I currently have a 3-year-old at home, and I know that that thought process remains. Like, it's pretty classical, where there are moments, and I like to answer that question for myself and for others. What do we do in these really big and intense situations? And almost 20 years ago, what that journey led me to was a deep exploration in, why do kids act this way? Like, and not act this way as if it's intentional, but like, where are these meltdowns coming from? And there were snippets of information from different resources. Daniel Siegel at the time had some articles coming out. It was well before the Whole Brain Child book that he's written, or the No Drama Discipline. I learned a lot from occupational therapists who specialize in sensory processing disorder and sensory integration, and from different play therapists as well. And there was this common thread that I had to sift and sort through to understand that when a child like Charlie is screaming, "I hate you," in public and seemingly immovable, in that moment, what's happening in his brain is that adrenaline and cortisol are running the show. And so I'm going to show you what this looks like if you haven't seen it before. The leading neuroscientist, Dr. Daniel Siegel, who bridged brain science with child development, talks about the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain. And he would say that in that moment with Charlie, the downstairs brain that houses the fight, flight, or freeze response is running the show. And for kids who have outward behavior that might look like defiance or look like manipulation or trying to get their way, they tend to have this fight response, versus kids who internalize stress, who withdraw, who have social anxiety, like I did as a teenager, and I would black out before 10th grade. That would be more of a freeze response. And we want to become aware of this whenever we're looking at, how do we help our kid have a successful school year, because it simplifies our process with them. It simplifies what we can do to support them. What we can do is we can target downstairs brain in our parenting and stay away from some of the strategies that well-meaning people advise us into. And those are upstairs brain strategies. So these are strategies for problem solving, for paying attention, for managing behavior. And if when Charlie had fire in the brain, when I used my 6 years of college education skills, problem solving skills, to narrate the situation, I'd say, hey, Charlie, what do you think we could do right now instead of screaming at me in the middle of the hallway? Like, we could think through problem, like I could bring it up, but in that moment, he'd just be like, scrabbling at me to get away and growing louder. Or classic in the autism or maybe ADHD field, we're like, hey, look at me, look at me when I'm talking to you. We're trying to get them to pay attention, thinking that eye contact is going to engage them where they have control over what they're attending to. But if the downstairs brain is activated highly in that moment, they can't get to these upstairs brain skills. Or we try their behavioral management strategies, and we've got the Take 5 breathing in the school system. We breathe in, and we breathe out, and we breathe in, and we breathe out. Or the breathing ball, or the kids yoga calming poses. And we wonder, well, why don't those work in the moment? And that's because there needs to be a certain baseline of that fight, flight, or freeze response being managed, better managed, instead of flooding their system. And what that flood of adrenaline and cortisol looks like from a simple graphic perspective is, it looks like there's fire in the brain. Everything is flooding. These stress chemicals are flooding your child's connective fibers and connective pathways, literally called the staircase of the brain. It's flooding that so they can't get up to these skills, even though we're trying to use these teachable moments. So we want to understand that this is happening when our kids are going through a new transition, if they're meeting new people. I'm speaking specifically to our emotionally intense kids, because some of these areas can be very generally and stereotypically challenging for them. And when so one of the things that I've created is the program called Mad to Glad Blueprint, and it teaches you, our starting point is how to calm fire in the brain and do something that you have control over. So the first thing that I want to ask you to reflect on, if you're here listening to the replay, is how do I add fuel to the fire? And if you're here and you're willing to type, go ahead and type in the chat box. I'll list a few ways that parents commonly add fuel to the fire. And maybe even specifically, you can think of right now in this season and stage, how do you add fuel to the fire? So some of the obvious ones are when I hear parents say, well, I grew up in a yelling household and I'm a yeller. Yep, yelling adds fuel to the fire in that situation. One of the common ones that parents don't often recognize is over-teaching with logic. So what I'm hearing at the beginning of the school year here is over-teaching with logic in an encouraging way. So it's very well-meaning. I was talking to a dad yesterday, and he was saying, I was telling my kid, oh yeah, I know you tried out for that sports team and you didn't make it, but that's okay. Being on this other team is fine, and we're still going to have fun, and I'm going to coach you. And the dad said, and in the meantime, like, I felt disappointed that we weren't on this higher level team, but he said, I poured way too much sugar on it. And the truth is that if we over teach with logic in the moment or over encourage, it's no different than if you have a tough day and you're trying to express that to a loved one or a significant other or a friend, and you say, yeah, I just had a really crappy day. And they say, oh, well, you know what? Tomorrow's going to be a new day. Like, all of this is going to pass and things are going to get easier. And they try to encourage you. And do you feel that inside you? You feel that, like, drop, that, oh, I don't, like, you're missing me. You don't see me at all. Versus if your friend says something to you, so like, I can see you're really upset about that. Are we going to complain for more time? Probably. Are we going to vent and get it out? Or if we're worrying about something, might we start crying? I am really worried about that because I'm running out of time and I feel like I'm behind, and what's going to happen to my kid, or what's going to happen, like we're forward projecting and worrying about them. And if somebody can say to us, like, I can see you're really worried about that, and just sit with us. This is like a wisdom practice. I think about older elders in my life who are grounded and wise and not quick to react. And they'll, if I'm talking about something that's hard about being a 40-year-old with a little kid at home and running a business, they'll kind of sit there and look at me and hold space, but not try to fix it, because they understand, like, yeah, that is the stage of life that you're in. And so I want to offer that to you as well. When your child's going through this phase, if they're already avoiding school, like I saw on one of the forms that you filled out, that your kid's been in school for only 4 weeks and they've missed 3 days of school. And so you're worried because last year they missed 40 days of school. What would that be instead of some of our traditional drive to make it better for kids, like encouraging them to go to school? What would happen if we sat with them without an agenda and we said, yeah, you're nervous about this. Now, that doesn't mean it ends there when we acknowledge emotions, but what it does do from a brain perspective is when you acknowledge somebody's emotions, the adrenaline and the cortisol calms down. The child, or the brain, if we're talking even about an adult, the brain feels connected. It feels like, oh, you hear me and you see me. It's not the solution yet. I get that. And I can't jump right into it at this moment. But that's one of the keys to creating a positive and supportive home environment, is meeting your child where they're at. Now, some kids don't need that much, or they don't maybe respond to or benefit as much from the nonverbal cues of softening your tone, of slowing down and sitting next to them, of making eye contact. But what they might do to feel really connected to you is they might want you to play side by side with them. They might want you to be in the room with them, but not talking or touching them. Like, this helps to help any human feel like I'm not alone. And there's such a loneliness epidemic that we experience as parents when we're navigating difficult situations and don't have a space to go to talk about it and shine some light into the darkest corners. And it's true for kids, of course, as we know, with social media and screen time, and it looks and feels like we're connected. There's a woman I sat next to at a meeting last weekend, and she said, "So how's parenthood?" And I'm like, "Well, my kid's 3." She's like, "Oh, I know, I've been following your journey." And I literally have not seen her since I was early pregnant. So almost 4 years. And hear it, from her perspective, she felt connected, but I didn't know that we were in each other's space really, and she was following my journey. And so I didn't feel that connection back without an in-person relationship. And so if we're trying to help our kids feel successful this school year, it's looking at how do we create connection with them at home, acknowledging their feelings around things, and how do we support actual social connections in their lives as we're starting fresh during the year. So I had 3 strategies that I've been writing about a lot lately on my blog and on social media. Strategies to calm anxiety, strategies to debrief what was great and what wasn't good for the day, as well as strategies around like teaming up for routines. And I always leave it open to whoever shows up on the call or submits questions to guide what I'm going to talk about today. So if you have something you specifically want to chat about, go ahead and type it in the chat box, and we can do some spot coaching around it, or I can do some teaching around it. But knowing that, yeah, and you can feel free to unmute, Lisa. I see your video on. What would you like to say? Oh, okay. You must have a dog because you held your finger up to your mouth. I'll wait momentarily.
Sorry, my dogs.
Okay.
So I think one of our biggest concerns right now is my child knowing boundaries. He rides a special needs van, and it's been, for us at this point, the best transition for him. He leaves happy, comes home happy, gets his stuff done. But yesterday brought up, there's another boy on the bus who was a few years younger, and he was hitting him and kicking him, and I was like, well, nobody puts hands on you, like, you've got to be firm. And he's like, oh, no, like, it's okay. And he wasn't listening to any reasoning. So, like, that's probably one of the big areas we're struggling with, of him setting boundaries and being
Yeah.
okay with that. He wants to just slide it away and be, oh, he didn't know better. I don't know if he speaks English. I don't know if he does this. Like, he's just little, mom. And just covering it up and not seeing and listening to, well, that's not okay. Because I know in past history, with when he rode the regular bus, kids pick on him. Well, then he shuts down and doesn't feel listened and heard. And the bus, as we can all say, is chaotic and crazy. And now going to a van where one of the passengers is his sister, and then there's 2 other children, and it's pretty mellow environment for the most part. And he's not seeing the need to put boundaries down. And then he's also just sugarcoating it, like, it's okay.
Yeah, I think I have an idea. So thank you for sharing that. And I might ask if you're willing later to share your win about your transition and rhythm for your school year, because that's one of the topics I was possibly going to cover today. So let me think about this for 1 second. I'm looking at the notes of people who filled out the form before the call. Yeah, okay, got it. So when I am in agreement with you about helping your child develop boundaries. And yet when you're not there, obviously you can't enforce it. And so when your kid is not right in front of you, we do the best that we can with processing through what's happening and making it really concrete and maybe even role playing. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment, as well as being in touch with the adults in that environment. So is it, do you call a school administrator? Is there a way to talk to the bus driver? Because it's not a new situation for them. And I know on a special needs van, it's not necessarily like bullying, but there still is a protective, if a child is dysregulated, like there's still a protective and like deserving to be safe while somebody's on the bus, right? So know that I would absolutely say like, yep, call somebody at the school right away too. So if he sugarcoats things, I'd be curious if he would is he 11, your son?
He's 10 and the school
10.
is handling it. And my daughter heard the question and she's like, oh, no. Like, if he does it again, the school will remove him off. It's more of handling, like, I'm not worried with how the school handles it. It's more how my son is just like, no, like, it's okay. And sugarcoating that aspect, but he's 10 and a
I see.
half.
Yeah, okay, great. Got it. Thank you. And your dad is listening to it. I hear that. I really like a strategy for helping kids process through the feelings of situations called worst case, best case, most likely case. And the way that like this could be a lighthearted conversation where you're prepping him for getting on the bus. And you could say, I'm thinking about if this was like you told me I don't have to worry and the school's taking care of it. I wanted to explore something with you called worst case, best case, most likely case. And you say, if this was the worst case scenario, what would continue to happen? And let your son just express it, because this is where any of us, kids or adults alike, will have worries or fears or resentment starting to build. So if we get to talk about it ourselves, it's a little bit like we're crafting our own movie and we get to create a new ending. So worst case scenario. And I mean, what do you think he would say if you asked him that?
So I did bring it up yesterday, said, well, what happens if this continues? And he again just immediately pushes it off. Like, it's okay. Like, I'll handle it. Like, it's not even like it's connecting in his head. More so, he doesn't like people to get into trouble, but he's quick to throw people under the bus if he's involved in the trouble part of it. But on this situation, it's not even like he's acknowledging that it's wrong. Like
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
immediately, so when we talk about worst case, this is one of those situations which is different than other ones where we've done worst case. He immediately deflects it back off again. And it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and that's true for situations that kids have a hard time exploring. So know that this might just be a tool, and that's not going to apply necessarily in this moment. But it feels good to hear that you've explored this with him in other scenarios. And sometimes for kids, when you're using a strategy like this, if you use it in low trigger moments, like, hey, so we're thinking about having some dessert after supper tonight. Now we're going to play worst case, best case, and most likely. What would be the worst case dessert scenario? And the kids would be like, if you gave me broccoli. So it can be playful and light like this. And what if it was the best case scenario? We would skip supper entirely and just have ice cream and cookies. Yeah, that would be the best case, huh? What's the most likely case? You're going to give me 2 cookies and that's it. And you're going to say I can't have more. Yep, that's right. So it's really just a way to engage in a reflective chat without having to generate a solution. And one of the things to be aware of here is we like to lead situations by saying, well, the worst case scenario, honey, is if this kid actually keeps kicking you. And what if you got a bruise and it went on for many weeks and then you didn't want to go to school anymore, but you didn't tell me about it because of the bus situation? Like we tend to paint the picture instead of asking them. So I'd be curious, is there any difference or nugget in there that might be new for you to use with your kid?
Yeah, because when you said that, I was like stopping and thinking about it yesterday. Like, wait, did I paint that scenario for him, or did I let him process it the right way and come up with the worst case? And so now I'm like contemplating, like, how did I handle that yesterday? Like, because I forget that when explaining and doing worst case, you can paint it and give them that idea, and that's not necessarily the best way for them to process. Um, but where my big concern was him just keep deflecting it off. He's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
little. He goes, he just got out of preschool and now he's in the next grade and he's little, and I don't think he understood me. And even though no is a universal word in most languages, like kids know what no is regardless of the language barrier, and it was like every excuse for him
Which
that
shows really, it shows really good theory of mind. I'm going to geek out here a little bit because theory of mind, what that means is um, I have the awareness that people are thinking things that are different than myself. And so I think that's something to congratulate your son on. And what can happen is if we painted the picture of the worst case scenario, they also might be deflecting, not just because he's showing the awesome skill of compassion towards this little kid, but they could be deflecting because like, you're taking this too far. It's not that big of a deal. So let him paint the worst case. And my recommendation is maybe this is a strategy to take at the beginning of the school year in other scenarios that's playful and it's a way to just engage in conversation. Maybe before a school field trip or, something like that. It gives kids a way to air out their feelings.
yeah, that's a good idea. I'll have to do that
Yeah.
because it was just the deflecting. Like he had all these excuses of why it was okay to let it happen. And I was like, well, buddy, but how does that make you happen? And then when I turned it to that way, he was right back into, well, he's little. And, you know, I said, well, do you have to learn the right words in the language he speaks at home? Like, we'll look that up. And he's like, well, no, but I don't know what he speaks. He goes, and so it
Mm-hmm.
was like just not acknowledging. I want him to realize he's safe in his environment. And
Yeah.
that's where it wasn't connecting with him that he deserves to be safe in his environment.
Beautiful. So here's another script. I have an autism background, so I like social scripts. One of the scripts that might be lovely to say, and you could be doing this already, but I'm saying this again, thinking about other parents on the replay, which is it's my job to make sure your environment keeps your body safe. And so let me make a bridge here with somebody who's talking about their kiddo who has anxiety and sensory processing disorder and ADHD. The kiddo who's having a hard time getting to school this year and last year. And what we can do is we can feel really nervous, like I need to take care of the situation and make sure they go to school because there's academic milestones, not to mention truly the disruption when we're expecting our kiddo to go to school, right? I'm not going to minimize that in any way. But to help calm the fire in the brain with children, it can be an important part of your relationship to let them hear how you're their advocate in a very simple way. So instead of like, I'm your advocate, I don't want this to happen again, I have your best interest, instead of changing the script over and over again to try like get through to your kid, a beautiful sentence is something like, it's my job to help make sure your environment is safe. And the skill for your son of developing boundaries this year, you could carry the script over to that as well, which is, it's my job to make sure your environment is safe, and it's my job to help you practice keeping your body safe. And then he'll like roll his eyes and stuff, but after he's heard it 1,500 times, come April, you might be able to look back and say, oh wow, we really made some strides in that area.
And I told him to, because it is a van, not a bus. There isn't another adult with. And I was like, I said, well, the driver wants to make sure you're safe as well. And, if something happens, she can't just pull over super quick. to help the problem or whatever it is. Like I said, you have to have boundaries. It's okay to have boundaries.
Yeah, very nice. Yep.
And then
Yeah.
he was like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And it's frustrating when there's a skill that we want our kid to have right now. I think about I mean, my kiddo was not even 2 yet. And there's a little boy who would want the toy that he was holding on to, and he would grab his shirt to take the toy. And most parents would say, if they were me, they would say, "Oh, look at that other kiddo wants your toy. We need to share." Like they would teach that skill. But I'm in the same boat as you, where I was teaching my kid to advocate because he would just lay down and give the toy. I'm like, I don't think that's going to be good for you either. So we had to work for his entire second year of life on, I would narrate, and when the boy grabbed his shirt, I would say, "Oh, there's no grabbing. He's not done with that toy yet." So that might be something that you can, instead of instructing, even though your kid's 10 and a half, instructing him, you should say this. When he tells you the story of what happened, you could almost reflect on it and say something like, "Oh, wow, yeah, you're like," what would be words you could say that he hears them, but not in an instructional way? So you could narrate over the top and say something like, "Oh, wow, he wasn't keeping your body safe." So it just flips the point of view again, like you're really relating to him instead of instructing him.
Yeah, I'll have to try that next. If it continues, I mean, we have a fabulous school district and the bus company does a phenomenal job, at least with regards with my kids. So I'll have to try that one if I can switch it, alter it a little bit so it's not
Mm-hmm.
me instructing and
Mm-hmm.
see if that kind of connects in because he's such a black and white concrete thinker.
Right, right, right. And so, and this is part of kind of the like the bullet point that I was writing for today's topic, which is how do we create a positive and supportive home environment that strengthens your connection with your child and these nuances. You know, you're more advanced in some of the parenting stuff that we're talking about because you know brain-based tactics, you've done Mad to Glad blueprint. I would love to share, because I promised everybody at the beginning, we're going to talk about why do kids act the way that they do, what's going on in their brain. So we're talking about the other kid on the van has a lot of fire in the brain. How do we parent these kids in the difficult situations? I was talking about matching fire with fire or adding fuel to the fire, or our tendency to instruct and like persuade and to encourage instead of just like coming alongside them and partnering up with them to help them know that part of our job is to keep them safe. And then like, let's look beneath the behaviors. So there can be a really big difference as to why some kids start the school year well and some kids really struggle. And I was going to talk about how to team up for routines, because a routine that's predictable calms fire in the brain. If there's rushing, if there's different caregivers, if there's different schedules, if there's different extracurriculars, if you know, if kids hear every single day, like, here's the 3 things happening today, and they have to wait till that day in order to hear them, that can be really stressful. And I'm not excluding myself. My kiddo has 4 caregivers: school, me, dad, and like a nanny. So we have a visual chart following the Waldorf color coding system of like, Monday is a purple day, and on purple day, mommy brings you to school and mommy picks you up. On Tuesday, it's a red day, and that's the day you're with your nanny all day. On Wednesday, it's a yellow day. You go to school and the nanny picks you up. So this type of visual, if they're little kids, picture and color can be really helpful. If they're older, having it written out or even having pictures in color is also helpful because we start seeing that there's a rhythm. And when we can't predict, for the parents who are listening to this right now, they're like, but my kid, I can't predict, they moved into middle school and they've got 7 classes today and it's not that predictable. And there's all these, things that happen in the hallways that are stressful. What I like to bring it back to is, what do we have influence and control over? And that is mapping out the 3 key times of day during the school year with kiddos are the morning routine, the after school routine or the get home routine, and then the bedtime routine. And for the most part, the items that happen in the morning routine and the bedtime routine, they don't change very much. There's some eating involved. There's some getting dressed or getting undressed involved. There's some toothbrushing possibly involved. There's some possible free time involved in the evening. That's, books and songs might be easier to think about than morning when things are feeling really stretched. So when we talk about routines, when you have a kid with more fire in the brain, and the families who fill out the form tend to range with kids age 5 to 12 from today. So when we're talking about routine, teaming up with your kiddo and talking about the steps and rearranging them so that there's an order where it really works, such as there was a dad who said, we're always rushing out the door because my kid spends 45 minutes in the bathroom and he's 7. I'm like, what is he doing for 45 minutes? And he's like, he said he's on the toilet. Like, but what's he doing on the toilet? Like, you're gonna get, I don't know. Okay. And he's like, well, he's watching YouTube videos. And I was like, okay. So when we're trying to create predictability for our kid and keep our calm, so we're not adding fuel to the fire, we're hearing these 2 layers now, we need to lead the routine and make sure the phone with YouTube videos happens after the daily tasks are done. So the kid's dressed, the kid's eaten. If they have meds, they've taken meds. The bag hopefully is packed in the launch pad zone the night before, so they're not scrambling to do it then. And then when those things are done, they earn that time. So talking about routine and teaming up with the kids to map out what needs to happen when, but you taking the lead in that can make a really big difference in a supportive and positive home environment. Would you like to speak about your success, Lisa? Then versus now.
Oh my gosh. So as I said a couple weeks ago, flat out honest, we didn't have a routine. Like I fooled myself that we had a routine. Transitions are hard going into school and then again going into summer. And I fooled myself thinking we had a routine. Well, this summer we had 0 routine. We're too busy for a routine. And it made me stop and realize like we had no routine. And it was child led and convinced me we did. So the start of this year, we moved my son from riding the bus to riding the van. And this year I only have 2 at home since my oldest started college. And so we went over, like you're getting on the bus at this time and what time would you like to wake up? And we started with 6 o'clock. That gives us an hour. And realized the first day of school, kind of into the second day, like that didn't work. It wasn't enough time. And he started on a Wednesday, and then that Friday, there was something going on, and he wanted up at 5:30. And I said, I think the Thursday he wanted up at 5:30, and I said, okay. So I woke him up at 5:30, and that night I said, do you want to wake up at 5:30 or do you want to go back to 5:45? And he goes, nope, I want 5:30. And I was like, oh, okay. I said, now why do you want 5:30? And he goes, because it gives me more time on the TV. He realized without anybody saying anything, if he got up before his sister, who takes longer in the bathroom, she's almost 14, takes longer in the bathroom. If he got up first, got his stuff done, that's setting him up to succeed. But he also thought he one-upped me because now he realizes he gets an hour and almost 15 minutes of TV. So his routine consists of getting dressed, brushing hair, taking meds, making sure his backpack and Chromebook are down by the door. And we don't do that the night before because his Chromebook has to be plugged in because it goes back and forth every day. And he cannot access TV because we have smart plugins and I'm a huge fan. And he needs me to physically go in the app and turn the TV on for him. So he knows now that he can't do anything until those steps are done.
So let me ask you a question because I don't remember the nitty gritty of what your routine may have been a year ago. So that sounds pretty straightforward to me. And you said something really key that you thought you had a routine this summer, but it was actually child led. So I'm making a guess like, well, you're allowing him to lead that he can, what time he can get up. But the other things that need to happen sound adult led, as well as when the screens are like the smart thing is on and off. Would you say like what would be the two biggest changes?
I think the two biggest changes right now, he's just shown a lot of growth. And like just the connecting the pieces again, he's a concrete thinker. And he realized he doesn't like waiting because then it pushes in his time. So that was a big change. Him making that realization that if he went to the bathroom after her, he doesn't get as much time. And the other one is really me giving the options and him having the control, even though it was led by me, the idea of I'm not forcing him to wake up at a certain time. I'm giving him options of when he wants to wake up. And we tried the different times and he figured out what works. And
Mhm.
me being in that mental health state that I'm currently in of we're in a calm state right now because I'm in a calm state. And that really makes a big difference too, of giving him the structure and the expectations now. And he's just ran off with it. Where before, trying up until this year, I've always had three kids to get out the door, three different personalities, three different speeds. And it was
Mhm.
really 3 on 1. And it was such a time consuming mental health like blow up where it was
For
just
sure.
easier to let them do whatever they wanted to do and get up whenever within reason of getting up whenever they wanted to get up. And I thought, oh, waking them up at 5:30 works. Well, they weren't getting everything done. Meds weren't getting taken. And me making that realization that first 3 days of school of man, like, he picked the times he wanted to wake up and he had control of it. And I'm fortunate because my kids do take meds. They all know who takes what meds,
Mhm.
and we
Yeah.
try to lay it out, but he's just flown with it.
Yeah, and the aspect that I'm hearing, again, just kind of looping in the stories of parents I think that and thoughts they might be having right now is finding the places that they have control and then finding the pieces that are repeatable and not varying on them. So if I could share one more topic because I want to make sure we get it in tonight. Thank you for sharing. Um the like how do we make sure that the school year is fun? Like you were saying, if there's a kid who has stronger need for control, it's working through together. Like when we'd gone through, I think it was pillar 5, or excuse me, pillar 6 on optimizing our daily routines. If we can take the lead in that and find the two places we can plug our kids' control in, but then have authority in the other areas, we become a very well-oiled machine. Or the other thing that becomes really relevant at this time of year, I'll go over to my blog because we just sent this out 2 days ago. Another mom of 3 kiddos, her kiddos are younger right now, Ashley's stories, is we were talking about feeling really overwhelmed during the school year because her middle kiddo is really strong-willed and spirited and stubborn. And so when we're considering the personality of our child, like Lisa, you're really good at saying, I know my son is a concrete thinker and I know that he needs to have some control in things. And I know that we need to have the smart plug to know when things are turning off. Some of the key areas that were summarized really nicely is that number one, staying calm so that when there's a lot of things that need to happen to get out the door in the morning, there's multiple children and there's multiple behaviors and feelings flying around, remembering to stay calm can allow you to not add to the chaos. Now, does that become a larger conversation for our own mental health? Like, what do I need to be calm? It does. a couple I was talking to this week said that mom is slated to work out a few times a week and dad's slated to work out every morning. And she's like, but we haven't been getting to it because of how the nighttime routine is unfolding. It's not going very well for us. So knowing that, I know people like to talk about the oxygen mask analogy on the airplanes. And I feel like yes, it's staying calm and caring for ourselves. And we still have to show up with our kids no matter what. So if we don't get that time to exercise or journal or meditate or whatever it is that you like to do, knowing that staying calm can be something like, be here, be where my feet are. Here I am. And I personally like a gratitude practice. Last night when my 3-year-old was overtired and hitting and not wanting to go to bed, and it was like, wow, what am I grateful for right now? Well, I still have the ability to redirect him because he's small, even though he's trying to hit and lash out. Like, can we find gratitude to bring us in the present moment and enjoy the fact that we get to parent these humans? The other one is establishing a rhythm. So Lisa just talked about that. And the daily rhythm helps our kids anticipate what's next. It helps you anticipate what's next. Who's in the bathroom when? Do I need to make sure that I'm up earlier or later than my kids being in the bathroom so that all of us have a chance to get ready in the morning or at night? And then the last one that we haven't talked about, but I'll touch on briefly and then move on, is quality connection time. So knowing that when your kid or kids are out of the house for childcare or for school settings, and maybe some before or after school settings, knowing that from an attachment perspective, so there's the science of attachment that says kids have an easier time with self-control and listening and cooperation when there's strong, predictable connection with their primary caregiver. So even if my kiddo is at nature school for 3 hours or with the nanny for 6 hours, before or after supper, carving out that 15, or he's little, so we'll get into train tracks for more like 20 minutes. Because that uninterrupted and quality connection time calms adrenaline and cortisol. Play or preferred items of interest are the ways that children can have the fire in their brain calmed, and they can feel more adrenaline. Oh no, I'm sorry. They can feel more oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin. So that quality connection time is something to consider, even though it feels really busy and wild right now at the beginning of some of our school years and some of our schedule. Practicing that uninterrupted time where maybe you have to set a timer and sit on the floor with your kid, or join your child when they're in the room doing homework, and can you sit next to them on the couch or when a book is being read. If they like to be outside, or versus the opposite of maybe outdoor adventure would be the kiddo who likes to do crafty, fine motor things, can you pull up a spot right next to them and be with them? Not with a lot of talking, not needing to entertain them, but that calms the stress chemistry from everything that happened through the day, and it creates this bond and this connection and oxytocin and serotonin that helps them to be more calm and more regulated. So we're just about going to wrap up here. I see, Carrie, you just popped in. If you had a main question or reason for being on the call, feel free to turn your video on or type in the chat box. We had 20 signups today, so I think most of you are going to be listening to the replay. And if you don't want to chat, you don't need to, but the invitation is there. And we'll send the replay out. So before we wrap up here today, having covered those 3 keys, I want to share that it's really natural sometimes when you come into the space designed just for parents, right? Like, I'm a certified parent coach, so I know that this is a really special place. A lot of us bring our kids to specialists or pediatricians, or talk to teachers or social workers, or our friends to find out, like, is it this hard for you? Is there something I can do to make this better for my kid and for us, for ourselves? And so if this feels special and you're somebody who is needing some further support, we're at a sweet spot in the year where in October, I'm leading my next live parenting cohort. And we'll send an email if somebody likes to learn this more by like reading it privately. Lisa, is there anything that you could share about what was beneficial for you going through the live cohort instead of just like going through the self-guided online version of learning the 8 tools?
I do better with the vocal guiding versus just watching a screen. It was very helpful to the point now where I think I'm going to join the next session of it. And that's for just with, I did things backwards, and now that I'm better on track with what I'm doing for myself, I think a lot of it will connect better. But I just, I found more time when it was scheduled every week and then every 2 weeks. I found the time to actually join on call versus having to turn around and watch a replay. I noticed I wasn't on, it was easy to just not do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's myself and certified Magic Lad mentor coaches. So on each call, it's not educational webinar like it is here. You have the 30-minute pre-class assignment, and then we do activities to say things like, okay, how do you match fire with fire? And we do it in small groups. We have mentor coaches in some of those breakout rooms, and you leave the call knowing like, oh, this is something I need to focus on for the week so that I can grow. And we're a really growth-oriented bunch. That's what the coaching field is. So it doesn't ever turn into a complaint fest, which I think is tricky in the parenting realm. Like we're all growing together because we love our kids and we want to enjoy the time we spend with them. So we will send that out. But if anybody needs to have a conversation with me to see if this is a match, I have free 30-minute time slots that you could schedule a call with me. You'd go to my website, samanthamoe.com/parents. And then what we're doing right now is we're getting to option 2, which is my plus program. It's all my online stuff, plus 6 months membership in my parent coaching community. So you get twice a month support. Plus you get a seat in the live cohort, which is once a week for 8 weeks with myself and the mentor coaches. So it's pretty powerful. But one of the things I wanted to show you, let me see if I put it here, is not just that we can talk for 30 minutes, but that actually, I think I said everything. So that's good. So you learn the 8 pillars of parenting. We walk through it step by step. And then alumni always get to go through at a super discounted rate in case you want to do it a second time. So our parent training curriculum is down here. And if you wanted to sign up, you're welcome to, or we can have a conversation around it. So in parting here today, I thank everybody. I'm not going to extend it past the 60 minutes unless somebody has a question for me, but know that parenting an emotionally intense child is a unique experience. So if you've been saying that to others and they're trying to be reassuring and encouraging and saying like, no, parenting's hard for me too. My kid does that too. It's one of my pet peeves that it's well-meaning, and kids who have more of this fire in the brain, they need specific tools in a specific order, and you can really change your situation quite quickly. So thank you all for showing up here today. You know where to find me, or email me hello@samanthamoe.com. And I hope to see some of you on private calls next month. Have a good one. Bye.